2 seconds now. 1 second. Okay. Why are eukaryotic cell compartments, also known as organelles, advantageous? Sammy. Okay. So they could be separated and flourish in those specific areas. I like that wording. Very good. So each thing is specialized to do its own function. Very good. Haley, do you have anything to add to that answer? No? I'm thinking there's a really good E word that we can put there. Efficiency, yes. Which you kind of described. Trying to get not called on. Describe the 2 specific types of cells you studied. So a moment on command terms. When it asks you to describe, okay, that's kind of, I like to think of it as kind of like a medium word, command term. Longer than like a state or a list, but it's not as long as explained. So when you're asked to describe the 2 types, you probably want to say what it's called and then give me some details. So, David, what was one of those 2 cell types that you studied? Okay. Well, even if you can't remember the name, are there any characteristics or descriptions you can give?
Ones that are like in the cell, like the organelles, or?
Well, you had 2 specific types of cells that you studied. Well, okay, so that's one karyotic. One, we could say to describe one of them, we would say that it was a eukaryotic cell. One of the 2 that you have to draw. And one of them, let's start with the animal. One of them was an animal eukaryotic cell. What was the name of that cell, Natalia? Yeah. Very good. So the exocrine gland cell was like the specific type of cell that you were to study. To describe that, we could say it was an animal cell. It's a eukaryotic cell. Volunteer some more characteristics of that. We could say, yes. Yes, we could say that these are found in sweat glands. What are the kind of glands? Give me a couple more. That would be a different, so found in the liver and pancreas, gastric glands, mammary, good. There is more, but I'm not going to write them all. Anything about the structure or the shape or the function? There's conversations that need to stop. Huh? Air kick. Squiggly. It's kind of like this shape. I don't know what you mean by squiggly. I have to explain more. It's like a Dorito. Yes, so they have a nucleus. Would it be wrong to draw when it asks you to describe? No, I don't think there's any problem with that. Yes, I would say that's a very good one. Lots of secretory vesicles. And those were our dark circles that were all clumped kind of at one end. Could you say more? You might be able to say a few more things. But I wanted you to see this because on a test, you might see, describe this cell, describe this thing, describe that thing. This is how you would do it. What is the thing that you're describing? And give some characteristics and traits of that thing. Okay. What was the name of the other one? Anybody? Mesophyll. So very good. Was that animal or plant? Plants. Proc or you? Eukaryotic. Plants are also eukaryotic. And was one of the main things about the organelles that was very obvious to us? The large central vacuole was pretty much the only organelle you could see, right? Very few and everything else was squished. So those are some things you could say. Cool. And it has a cell wall. Very good. Okay. Here is where we are in our notes. I have some videos today. Writing video. So you'll have a bit of writing and then a video break. Okay. So we need to, part of what we're learning here is structure and function, right? Structure is what will determine the function of a cell. So what we're going to look at for these next examples, you should be on this page, your different types of cells. We're going to look at how certain structures in these cells provide the function that it carries out. This is where you're going to need two colors. In my notes, you need a box for that. In my notes, I'm going to use red and blue, but you can use whatever two colors you want. Yeah, but don't you have a box? Yes. So while you're doing that, we are noticing that what we're going to be noticing is that certain functions is tied to the structure. This allows cells to focus on fewer tasks at once and do the work more efficiently. So again, we're like efficiency of cells, okay? So as you can see, I understand the pencil noise, I don't understand the talking noise. As you see in this image, we have cells of all different shapes and sizes, okay? So we'll look at that. Somewhere, no, wait, yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. It was too little for me. Okay, yeah, go ahead and write this bold. Under where it says why will cells with different functions have different structures? Allows them to focus on fewer tasks and be more efficient. I would shorten that. Allows them to focus on fewer tasks and be more efficient. This is just pencil. The colors are coming soon. You could also, if you want, you could write in all pen or pencil and highlight different colors. That would be fine too, whatever you prefer. Function.
Can't see, so I thought that was.
Sorry, it was a little messy too. Very tired today. Okay, so this allows cells to focus on fewer tasks, being more efficient. Okay. So in the next section of your notes, I'm going to have in red the structure and in blue the function. I would like you to choose also two colors. Somewhere right above that table, maybe right above where it says muscle cell, write yourself a key. What color are you going to use for structure? What color are you going to use for function? Structure, function, structure, function. Yes. I don't care where it is. Okay. If you want to make it simple for your brain, use my colors. But it's fine if you use different colors. Just make sure you're using the same color for structure and the same color for function. So we're always going to come back to this idea. Structure determines function. That's like a big key idea in biology. So our first one is the muscle cells. So in the box with the muscle cells, you're going to write the structures and the functions. So I would write like two sections. I would write 2 bullet points because we have like 2 different sections. So for 1 bullet point, these muscle cells, which their fancy name is myofibrils, they have protein filaments that are stacked and overlapped. That should be red too. Protein filaments that are stacked and overlapped. Write that in red. And then that is the structure, right? This is a specific layout. You can kind of see it in this image, but you'll see it better in the video I have for you. So that's the structure. The function of that, this overlapping stacked structure, gives it the function of the contraction. You guys know how you can contract your muscles, right? They shorten and then lengthen, and shorten and lengthen. And how that happens is because these filaments slide over each other to transmit electric signals, and that causes them to shorten and lengthen, shorten and lengthen. So that'll make more sense in the video. But again, the structure is that they're stacked and overlapped. The function, why it is that way, is so that it can slide. It's called the sliding filament model or theory. Sliding filament. You can kind of almost think of it as like an accordion, right? The reason an accordion works is because it has that shape of being that foldy shape. So this is a similar idea. The second structure function is that they contain many mitochondria. I should have that in red as well. Many mitochondria. And that's part of its structure, right? Some organelles have more mitochondria than others. Sorry, some cells. So the structure that has a lot of mitochondria, the function is because in order to contract your muscles, you need a lot of energy, right? That's why we eat, especially if you want to go to the gym. I read the other day, the best snack before a gym is a banana because it gives you long-term energy, slow release energy. I don't know if that's enough before the gym. For me, I feel like one banana would get me like maybe 20 minutes of working out, but I do see that it is good. It's also good for your muscles to prevent cancer. Oh, I've been getting cramps like crazy. With me, with bananas, I have to wait till they get pretty brown. So I buy them and then they're not ready to eat for like another week. You know, they are more cancer fighting when they're brown. And sweeter.
What's your leg press?
Actually, I don't know exactly, but I know it's pretty strong because I built my leg muscles real strong when I was like younger. I played soccer. Jeez. I know mine is pretty high for my age and size. All right. I want you guys to watch this video so you can see. We can turn off the lights. She talks like really fast, okay? But remember, this is more just for you guys to get the idea of structure, function, okay? You're not memorizing everything in this video, okay? But try to understand it the best you can.
Cellular level. An understanding of the structure of skeletal muscle is useful when learning how sliding filament theory works. Each muscle is made up of a number of bundles of muscle fibers. Each bundle of muscle fibers contains anywhere from 10 and 100 individual fibers. Each muscle fiber itself contains cylindrical organelles known as myofibrils, which themselves are bundles of proteins called actin and myosin.
Okay, so here's the cell up here at this level. And inside the cell, we have two different proteins, actin and myosin. Those are the overlapping structure. Okay, remember, we're focusing on overlapping structure. And you'll see how that works into its function.
Surrounding the myofibril, there is a network of tubules and channels called the sarcoplasmic reticulum.
Calcium is stored. Each myofibril can be broken down into functional repeating segments called sarcomeres. If we look at a two-dimensional model of a sarcomere, it consists of actin and myosin. When a nerve impulse arrives at the muscle, it causes a release of a chemical called acetylcholine. The presence of acetylcholine causes depolarization, enabling calcium to be released from the sarcoplasmic reticulum. The calcium binds to troponin, changing its shape and so moving tropomyosin from the active site of the actin. The myosin filaments can now attach to the actin, forming a cross bridge. The breakdown of ATP releases energy, which enables the myosin to pull the actin filaments
So
inwards,
this is what's
contracting
happening.
the
Like,
muscle.
contract the muscle real quick. Squeeze a fist.
This occurs along the
Like
entire length of every
make a muscle in your
myofibril in the
bicep.
muscle cell.
This is what's happening.
When an ATP molecule binds to the myosin
Grab
head,
it on,
the myosin detaches from the actin and the
grab and
cross
pull,
bridge
grab
is
and pull.
broken. When the
Very
ATP
good.
is then broken
And
down,
then when
the
you
myosin
release,
head can again
they
attach to an
release as
actin
well.
binding
And then it
site
goes back to
further
where it
along
was
the
before.
actin filament and repeat the process.
What the crap?
This repeated pulling of the actin
When it
over the
contracts and won't
myosin
let go.
is often known as the
Yeah.
ratchet mechanism. This process of muscular contraction can last for as long as there are adequate ATP and Ca+ stores. Once the nerve impulse stops, the
Yeah,
Ca+
it has to
is
do. I don't know
pulled
if
back
you
to the
heard in the beginning,
sarcoplasmic
but it talked
reticulum,
about like
and
calcium,
the actin returns
and
to
that
its resting
ion
position,
needs to flow
causing the
across
muscle
the
to
membranes
lengthen
in
and
order for it to
relax.
do what it's doing. So that's why they say if you have a cramp, if you can get some salt into you real quick, that will help. I start like
Slide-
massaging it, but even that hurts. Usually I just sit up because I get mine in the middle of the night. I just sit up and like cry until it goes. I was doing a Spartan race one time with my uncle, and he got a double calf cramp at the same time. And he was on the ground, just like obviously in pain. And this guy was like running by, and he threw mustard packets at him. He's like, "Here, drink these." And then he just kind of kept running. And he drank the mustard packets, and then his cramps went away pretty quick. And I think it's because the mustard is very salty. And then a lot of other people carry packets of salt. But we saw that guy later, and I was like, "Why mustard?" And he's like, "For me, it's just easier to eat mustard than just straight salt." So he carries mustard packets for his cramps. Yeah, and that's what I was thinking. I was like, and I hate mustard. I was like, I would have just suffered. Okay, we're in the nerve cell now, also known as neurons. These have a really different shape than the last cell we looked at. So our structure, okay, again, we kind of have two sections here. One structure is that they have these long extensions. We call them axons. So you can see in the picture, you've got kind of the main body, this large spherical section here. And you can see all these branches coming off. They're called axons and dendrites, actually. So these kind of spider-like projections, which are the structure, give to the function that they can transmit electrical signals throughout the body. It's like a network, right? So it wouldn't be very efficient to transport signals if you just had one roadway, right? Like if you think about our freeways and our streets, we have all these different connectors so you can get places efficiently. So again, structure having these branching long extensions makes it easier to get these electrical signals throughout the body. I'm sure you could think of lots of examples where you need electrical signals immediately. For example, driving a car, coming to a red light. You need to stop immediately, right? It would not be good if it took 2 minutes for that signal to get to your brain to tell you to stop. So we want these signals to be fast so we can protect ourselves from it. Yeah, and then the second one's very similar. We have these branches so they can communicate with other nerve cells, muscles, and glands. Okay, so it's just like, you can definitely think of it kind of like roadway, highway connectors, right? Okay, then I have a video about neurons. In year 2, we will actually go into the nervous system. We will dive deeper into neurons and specifically how they work. But right now, you're just getting a quick preview.
Neurons communicate with each other, relaying messages throughout your body and powering all of your thoughts and actions. Neurons talk to each other using both electrical and chemical signals. Messages start as electrical signals traveling rapidly down a neuron. These signals are called action potentials. When they reach the gap between two neurons, the messages need some help to get across. The information is transformed from an action potential into a chemical message, which crosses the gap called a synapse. The release of those chemical messengers can trigger an action potential in the neuron on the other side of the synapse, conveying the message onward. Or it can quiet the message. This happens over and over and over. And with repeated activity, the synapse gets stronger, so the next message is more likely to get through. That way, neurons learn to pass on important messages and ignore the rest. This is how our brains learn and adapt to an ever-changing world.
Okay.
Neurons communicate with each other.
Next one, red blood cells. As you can see, they look very different than a neuron. Structure, function. Structure here, again, two kind of different sections. Structure is that there is a flexible disc shape. Ready? I don't have time to wait for you to talk first. Flexible disc shape to increase surface area. We're actually going to get to surface area in a very close unit. Why that's important? Why the structure of flexible disc shape is important is because it helps to transport oxygen around the body. We'll see a lab, possibly maybe Bugle lab if I could get it set up, that the more surface area there is, the more easily things can move across the cell membrane. So we want oxygen to be transported around quickly and efficiently, right? We know our cells need oxygen. If they don't get the oxygen, they start to die, and we can't go very long without oxygen. So we want that process to be efficient, and it's efficient because of the structure of the cell, which is that flexible disc shape. The second section here, another structure-function relationship, is that they have enormous amounts of hemoglobin. And that large amount of hemoglobin, again, helps with oxygen transport. Oxygen actually binds to the hemoglobin. Okay, so when you breathe in oxygen, that oxygen needs to stick to something, and it will stick to the hemoglobin. So the more hemoglobin you have, the more oxygen can stick, therefore getting moved throughout your body more efficiently. I would probably say healthy diet. So hemoglobin has iron in it, and so you might have heard about people taking iron supplements, or you just eat a steak. The first 3 times I attempted to give blood, they denied me, and because I had low iron. And they told me that exact same thing. They're like, here is some foods you can eat to get more iron. And having a steak was on that list.
Because when you're cooking it, when it's medium rare, all the red stuff, like the blood or whatever,
Yeah.
that's all you.
Yep. Yeah. Which is why people say eating it rare is more healthy for you. I grew up eating well done steaks. Now I've right. And I thought it was normal. Now I'm doing like a medium well because it's still hard for me to eat there. Also, being pregnant, you have to be more careful with stuff like that. Not while I'm pregnant. There's like mercury issues and things like that. I'm not a huge sushi fan. I've been getting better. I've been eating the dragon roll. My husband will get a dragon roll. I'll eat like 2 pieces.
You breathe in about
I know. He wants to so
17,000
bad.
times per day.
There we go.
It's a process you rarely think about, but behind the scenes, a huge coordinated effort is playing out. Your vital organs, the gut, brain, bones, lungs, blood, and heart, work together to sustain your life by delivering oxygen to tissues throughout your body. Most of our cells need oxygen because it's one of the key ingredients of aerobic respiration. That's the process that produces a molecule called ATP, which our cells use to power their many incredible functions. But getting oxygen throughout our bodies is a surprisingly difficult task. Gas enters cells by diffusing in from their surroundings, and that only happens efficiently over tiny distances. So, for oxygen to reach the cells within our bodies, it needs a transportation network. This is where our 20 trillion red blood cells come in. Each one contains about 270 million oxygen-binding molecules of hemoglobin, which is what gives blood its scarlet hue. To make these cells, the body uses raw materials that become available from the food we eat. So in some ways, you could say that oxygen's journey through the body really begins in the gut. Here, in an amazing display of mechanical and chemical digestion, food gets broken down into its smallest elements. Like iron, the building block of hemoglobin. Iron is carried through the cardiovascular system to the body's hematopoietic tissue. This tissue is the birthplace of red blood cells, and it can be found enclosed within our bone marrow cavities. The kidneys regulate our levels of red blood cells through the release of erythropoietin, a hormone which causes marrow to increase production. Our bodies churn out roughly 2.5 million red blood cells per second, a number equivalent to the entire population of Paris, so that oxygen that makes it to the lungs will have ample transportation. But before oxygen can even reach the lungs, the brain needs to get involved. The brainstem initiates breathing by sending a message through your nervous system, all the way to muscles of the diaphragm and ribs. This causes them to contract, thus increasing the space inside the rib cage, which allows the lungs to expand. That expansion drops your lungs' internal air pressure, making air rush in. It's tempting to think of our lungs as two big balloons, but they're actually a lot more complicated than that. Here's why. The red blood cells in the vessels within your lungs can only pick up oxygen molecules that are very close to them. If our lungs were shaped like balloons, air that was not in direct contact with the balloon's inner surface couldn't diffuse through. Luckily, our lungs' architecture ensures that very little oxygen is wasted.
So again, structure function. We're not doing lungs or lung cells, but just the general idea of structure versus function. Another pattern you'll see is increasing surface area. So if we want to maximize the oxygen getting into our lungs, we increase the surface area that the oxygen can diffuse across from. So that's why we see all these branching patterns. Okay, like in nature, we see a lot of branching stuff, right? And that's for a reason. You do? Oh. Yeah, so we'll see that pattern of increasing the surface area through this branching kind of pattern. So again, structure function.
Their interior is divided into hundreds of millions of miniature balloon-like projections called alveoli that dramatically increase the contact area to somewhere around 100 square meters. The alveolar walls are made of extremely thin, flat cells that are surrounded by
Another structure
capillaries.
function.
Together, the alveolar wall and capillaries make a 2-cell thick membrane that brings blood and oxygen close enough for diffusion. These oxygen-enriched cells are then carried from the lungs through the cardiovascular network, a massive collection of blood vessels that reaches every cell in the body. If we laid this system out end to end in a straight line, the vessels would wrap around the Earth several times. Propelling red blood cells through this extensive network requires a pretty powerful pump, and that's where your heart comes in. The human heart pumps an average of about 100,000 times per day, and it's the powerhouse that ultimately gets oxygen where it needs to go, completing the body's team effort. Just think, this entire complex system is built around the delivery of tiny molecules of oxygen. If just one part malfunctioned, so would we. Breathe in. Your gut, brain, bones, lungs, blood, and heart are continuing their incredible act of coordination that keeps you alive. Breathe out.
All right. Think you want to breathe? All right. Yeah. It's interesting how often we hold our breath and don't realize it. That's something that a lot of times you'll work on in yoga too. Because anytime you get into like a painful pose or a difficult pose, we tend to stop breathing, which is the worst thing you could do because breathing will actually help the pain lessen and take your mind away from the pain. So I know when my yoga teacher, whenever she puts me in a weird pose, she'll go, find your breath. And I'm always like, oh yeah, I should do that. I should breathe. That's why I always remind you when you guys are taking tests too, because when you're in a stressful situation, you tend to, I mean, not that you completely stop breathing, right? But you don't breathe as deeply or as fully as you do when you're relaxed. So it's good to be mindful of that. All right, sperm cells. Again, very different look to them, right? They look nothing like a blood cell, nothing like a neuron. They have their own little shape. So one thing about their structure is that they have DNA, which helps them with their function, which is to spread DNA, right? Another, so you actually have 3 sections on this one, maybe 3 different bullet points. Another structure function relationship is that they have digestive enzymes in them. Similar, maybe not similar, but kind of like how we have digestive enzymes in our stomach to break things down. They need to get into the egg. And in the video you're about to watch, you'll see the egg has a pretty tough layer of protection. So in order to get into the egg, which is their function, right? We can't have fertilization unless it gets into the egg. It has these digestive enzyme structures to help with that function. Actually, sorry, I lied. There's 4 sections. Mitochondria, again, they have a lot of mitochondria because they need to propel themselves. They need to swim. And then again, the last structure would be the flagella. Not all eukaryotic cells have a flagella, but sperm cells do because it is their way to propel themselves throughout their journey. So we have 4 structure functions. Having DNA is the structure to give the function of spreading the DNA. Second structure, having digestive enzymes for the function of getting into the egg. Third, having mitochondria for energy to swim. And fourth, having a flagella to be able to swim. You wouldn't be able to swim very well if you didn't have arms and legs, right? All right, are you ready to watch the journey of the sperm?
Yeah.
It's gonna be.
I like.
This video is a pretty new animation. So it's probably as real as you're gonna get without seeing the whole real thing, because that's still impossible. It was made in 2019, so I think the graphics are pretty good. A GoPro. You have to be a pretty tiny GoPro.
Development of a new
There we go.
during sexual intercourse, about 300 million sperms enter the vagina. To enter the uterus, sperms first need to pass the cervix, which is open while the woman ovulates. However, some sperms will not make it into the uterus. Cells from the woman's immune system mistake the sperms for foreign invaders and attack them. Thousands die. Many sperms find their way into both fallopian tubes, but only one tube contains an unfertilized egg cell. While being in the fallopian tube, trying to reach the egg cell, some sperms get trapped by the cilia and die. Only a few of the original 300 million sperms have survived and managed to reach the egg cell, while this one is being pushed towards the uterus. The egg cell is covered with a layer, the corona radiata. Sperms must push through it to arrive at the zona pellucida, the outer layer of the egg cell. They attach to specialized receptors, which enable them to burrow into the outer egg layer. Inside the zona pellucida is a narrow, fluid-filled space which surrounds the egg cell. The first sperm to make contact will fertilize the egg. But how does this process look like if sperms and egg cell are not in optimal condition? The amount of sperms is less. Their agility is massively reduced. They swim slower, which means they struggle longer in the dangerous environment on their way to the egg. When reaching the egg cell, they fail to burrow.
All right, that's just talking about when things don't go as good. And at the end, they're like, how can we prevent that? And they say, eating healthy diet, living healthy lifestyle, staying away from alcohol, like all those things could actually affect all of this. I actually recently saw a source that they were saying that the sperm actually work together to get into the egg. Only one gets in, but they kind of all work together to chip away at the outside. And then it's just the first one that gets in is the winner, I guess you could say. Did you know it was so difficult? The human body does not make it super easy.
People do like multiple times, right? Like sometimes they'll make it to the egg, but then
they can't get in. Yep. Or sometimes the timing's off because like the egg is like on its own journey. It gets dropped down and then it's like it moves. And if the sperm doesn't get there before it gets in to the next layer, then you missed your chance. So the window is very small to make that happen. On top of like all of those dangers. The human body, the female body will attack it. It'll get stuck in the cilia. Like there's a lot of obstacles, which is why a lot of people call it a miracle. Okay, last one, skin cells. One structure with a bunch of functions. Skin cells are extremely flat and highly keratinized. Is a protein. Your hair is made of keratin. You know that your hair is dead, right? Except for the follicle.
Yeah.
And all of that is just keratin that was being produced by that follicle. And now it's just hanging from your head. And your nails, yep.
That way it can't move.
No. Unless you do one of those like flips. Why is that good? Well, protection. We should probably know our skin is there for protection. Protect against microbial, viral, fungal, parasitic. Also, UV, heat, solute, and water loss from the body. Lots of things. So those highly keratinized, specialized cells protect us from almost all the bad things in the world. All the major except things that we choose to put inside of our body that we shouldn't. Poisons. It can't help us against that. Although you do have your liver, which does the best it can, and your kidneys, which does the best it can. All right, I know we have 5 minutes left. I'm gonna assign you a video for homework. I think we can all handle watching a video. And my other thing I would like to mention is we're gonna finish these notes on Monday because our test is Tuesday. We're probably gonna need to move. You still 5 minutes, please don't pack up because that distracts you from what I'm saying. We're probably gonna need to move relatively quickly, okay? So you may think about possibly filling out your packet over the weekend. That way you're not rushing to write and then trying to listen at the same time. Okay, I'm not assigning it necessarily, but it could be a good strategy, especially for those of you who are slower writing. Guys, we're gonna watch this video, but I just want to mention, and you can write this down, I'll send you a reminder. There is a video on slide 94. So in here, you're gonna go to slide 94. And it's kind of a long video, but it's very, very fascinating. And it goes along with our last topic of where did eukaryotic cells come from? We looked at the origin of life, which was Luca, which was most likely a prokaryotic cell, or a very simple prokaryotic-like cell. We know that prokaryotes existed for a long time before eukaryotes. So this video is going to go into how did we go from prokaryote to eukaryote. Okay, so it's very fascinating. It has a lot of really cool real video of cells and things. And you guys know Hank Green. He's the one who annotates it. I like him. I think he talks a little slower in this. Okay, so we're going to finish up with this video. Please remember, we have syllabus statements. We have past syllabus statements to fix. You have a video to watch and maybe finish writing your packet, but we will finish it on Monday. Your test is on Tuesday. Okay. I guess we won't finish the video, but that's okay.
Between you and the rest of the world lies an interface that makes up 16% of your physical weight. This is your skin, the largest organ in your body. Laid out flat, it would cover close to 1.7 square meters of ground. Its purpose may seem obvious, to keep our insides in. But a look beyond the surface reveals that it plays a surprising number of roles in our lives. First, the basics. Skin is the foundation of the integumentary system, which also incorporates your hair, nails, and specialized glands and nerves. Made up of 3 layers, the epidermis, dermis, and hypodermis, skin's thickness varies from 0.5 millimeters at its thinnest and up to 4 millimeters at its thickest. It also carries out 3 key functions: protecting, regulating, and sensing the world beyond its limits. On a daily basis, its huge surface processes hundreds, if not thousands, of physical sensations, relying mostly on large, pressure-sensitive skin components called Merkel cells. In your fingertips alone, there are 750 Merkel cells per each square centimeter of skin, coupled with over 2,500 receptors that give you your sense of touch. This surface is also the body's first major line of defense. Without it, you'd be a soggy mass of tissue and fluids, fatally exposed to the elements. Skin effectively seals off your insides and also absorbs pressure and shock with flexible collagen that makes up most of its dermal layer. The epidermis is made up mainly of skin cells called keratinocytes that are completely replaced every 4 weeks. As new cells form at the base of the epidermis, older ones are pushed up. When these cells move upwards, they're filled with a hardened protein called keratin. Once they reach the surface, they form a tightly overlapping, waterproof layer that's difficult for invading microbes to breach. Any harmful microbes that make it into the epidermis will encounter Langerhans cells. This group of protective skin cells detects invaders and communicates their presence to resident immune system T cells, which react by launching an immune response. A crucial feature of this immune defense is the several thousand species of microorganisms that inhabit the planes, folds, and crevices of your skin. These microbes, which include bacteria and fungi, thrive in the sebum, an oily substance that's secreted onto the skin's surface by sebaceous glands nestled.
So 16, 17 is junior year, right? And then 17, 18 is senior. Okay, because we can't for Interact, we could apply to be guides at Pride. It's like a leadership camp. You have to be 16 to 17. So if you're 16, 17, and you are interested in being a leadership guide at a 7th grade camp, you'll be able to apply for that. You can leave it. So come to Interact because those applications are due Monday. So if you don't come today, you'll miss that chance if you're interested. Bye, have a good day.